tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh, yeah, here we go. Another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question. Well, you can't make more time. You can. The deferred sales trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
Very good. Here we are today with another wonderful, fantastic episode of the DST Mastermind. We have with us Brett Swartz, Pierce York, and a few other invitees here to the meeting and the Mastermind. Brett has somewhat lost his voice, so he'll mostly be answering questions as we poke and prod at him during and through his misery. Pierce, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Yourself?
I'm doing well. You can't complain. I mean, you can see the palm trees behind me. I don't know if you can see the water very well or not, but it's
beautiful.
It's a fantastic day. Not exactly Newport, where you're usually calling in from, but I see that you're in the mobile office today. Tell us how your day's going, Pierce.
The day's going pretty well. We got some sick kiddos that we're dealing with, so kind of throwing off a little bit of the productivity, but finally got out and trying to get back onto it. So,
well, very good. Well, let's touch on what brings us together here. Here we are, year end. It's the 30th of December. And, everybody's got New Year's Eve tomorrow. Everybody's got big plans, but we still show up to this mastermind because there's some really important things that bring us here today, Pierce. Essentially, if I were just to touch on a little bit of our mission, and then if you'll touch on the vision, I'll say that we're out there to help people know what their options are in regards to highly appreciated assets and how they can reinvest those without having to pay the taxes every time they buy and sell. But will you go ahead, Pierce, and tell us the vision, how it is that we accomplish what we do, and who's eligible for something like this?
Sure. So I'll start with the vision. The vision for the mastermind group that you guys are all on today is to build that community and a place for you to come to get your questions answered, to bring your professional team, and basically just learn more about the deferred sales trust or some other options. It's a place to brainstorm. It's a place to just kind of talk through specific deals. It's a place to hear from other people who have done deals and just kind of get comfortable with the process. As we kind of go through, there's a lot of people ask what are the downsides, what are the pros and the cons, and one of the tricky things that I found is there's not too many cons with this strategy. It's a really elegant strategy, but one of the things that it does require some trust and working together with people like yourself and Brett, Jake, and it also requires a little bit of a learning curve because a lot of people haven't heard about it. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to develop that relationship, explain, answer questions, and just kind of add value to people as we go through. Absolutely. Who's eligible for a transaction is somebody who is thinking about liquidating a highly appreciated asset. That asset can be anything from highly appreciated real estate, whether it's primary home or investment real estate, commercial real estate. It can be highly appreciated stock, public or private. It can be cryptocurrency that's highly appreciated, although probably not a ton of those right now. A business, some art. I believe you guys were working on a deal with a racehorse. So anything that's highly appreciated can leverage this strategy. One of the kind of criteria that you have to meet is there has to be enough pain in it for you, and that's kind of going back to the idea of there's a trust factor, there's a learning curve, right? So the pain has to be enough, and we've really found that $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain, pretty much in any market, regardless of where you are within the United States, is going to be a home run per se. It's going to make a lot of sense everywhere you go. So you can also do a couple transactions if they're 500 and 500 that add up to that million. But you really want that $1 million in the trust to get the returns that you want, and you really want a taxable liability that's pretty painful. If you have a $30,000 tax and within $1 million gain because of some other offsets, you're better off just paying the tax and not having to worry about it and just kind of moving on.
So Pierce,
hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And just going along with that, what do people get with this trust? Let's talk about the other value adds real fast before we dive into the nuts and bolts of the deferred sales trust. When somebody,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned the $1 million or more, because then there's enough tax paying for this to be a no-brainer. It's a home run. It's an easy play, right? But regards to the executive team that they now have access to, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, that we kind of come across of, and I'm gonna kind of add some context to that question a little bit, if you don't mind, Jake. One of the objections that we get a lot, specifically from your other professionals, your trusted advisors, these are your CPAs, your financial advisors, your estate planning and tax attorneys, all those people that you've already developed your team, sometimes can come in and feel threatened by us. And so what we want to do is we want to really kind of like mitigate that and put those fears to rest, because what we do is very specialized in capital gains tax programs, specifically with the deferred sales trust. There's some other strategies and stuff like that we can talk through depending upon your unique situation. But one of the things that you get is you get a team of specialists that can come alongside your current team, and they can really enhance your team. They're a value add to they're power up, essentially, right? So not only do you get a stellar team to go with it, but that team includes people like Brett Schwartz, who's the trustee, also, commercial real estate broker, done over 100 million, in deals with multifamily real estate, right? You get a guy like Jake Miller, who's attacks other, ideas and strategies that we can help fit in with in a holistic view, works very well with other professionals. You get Campbell Law Firm, who comes in and provides lifetime audit defense to your trust, so that if you were to ever get into an audit, you have protection, and they'll do that at no extra cost from the fee that you paid up front. And so you get a lot of support around there. The other thing is that within that, we've got a lot of connections and a lot of relationships as well, and potential opportunities for other investments or other deals or other people to connect you up with, that could add a ton of value to you as well. So you not only get, you're not just getting a tax strategy, you're getting a full-on team, right, to come in and enhance your current team, right, upgrade it, make it even better without replacing everybody. And then on top of that, you get audit defense, You get opportunities to invest in other, deals and other assets. You get a connection of people, and you become part of the community. So hopefully that answers your question.
So just to regurgitate some of the things you said, essentially, if somebody's looking at paying 20% capital gains tax on $1 million transaction, maybe a 3.8 Medicare tax, and maybe some state taxes like California, like upwards of 13.3%. So if they're paying over 40% in taxes with all of that nonsense, then this obviously, shoot. Not only do they get to reinvest the bulk proceeds net of attorney fees rather than net of taxes, but they also get a dream team to supplement their existing team, not to necessarily replace or step on toes, but to help and assist with this higher level strategy, helping take them to the next level, so to speak. Is that what I heard you say, Pierce?
That is correct.
Wonderful. Well, very good. Also want to welcome Jake Carpenter today. Jake calling in from which state? Washington? Oh, you're on mute.
Washington State.
Very good. Whereabouts in Washington?
It is it's a balmy 32 degrees right now.
A balmy 32. Well, that almost sounds painful, speaking about where I'm talking from right now, but I'm going to be right there with you in a couple of days. I'll be back in Utah, where it's not balmy at all, but it's so cold. I think at the slopes, there's 6.5 feet of snow right now, of new snow.
Yeah, I'm right here in Kennewick, Washington, kind of south central Washington.
Well, very good. Now, Jake, before we dive a little bit more into what is the Deferred Sales Trust, how it works, and some of our client stories, existing deals, all of that stuff, I don't know, maybe it's been just a couple of months, you've been getting to know the Deferred Sales Trust. You come from a financial advisor background. You specialize in alternative investments, direct placement programs, assets that aren't volatile like the market necessarily, and you help clients get into those types of assets. But help us understand what your journey's been like in regards to the Deferred Sales Trust, how you first heard about it, and what just kind of how it's been over the last couple of months getting to know it alongside of your clients.
Yeah, so I've actually been working with Brett Swartz for right around 4 to 5 years. So it's just in the last year that it's really picked up traction. I am an investment advisor. However, I'm very real estate focused and alternative asset focused. It's just taken some time to really break in. The area that I live in, there's a lot of skepticism. My clients tend to be business owners. They tend to be land owners, farm owners. They own a lot of real estate. That is my target market. And after it took me a few years to kind of break through the skepticism and get, a couple clients under my belt, the ball really started rolling this last year. People talk, referrals start coming. But it's just been, a lot slower than I hoped, but there's a lot of skepticism. People in Washington State haven't heard much of the Deferred Sales Trust, even though it's nothing more than an installment sale. So my big message to anyone, that may be watching this or on is you just have to be consistent. You have to keep talking about it, keep educating people. I'm not super focused on traditional investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. I've been gracious enough to be introduced and spent a lot of time visiting with Jake Miller over the last couple months. So we've had a chance to work together on some alternative stuff, alternative investment strategies. But it's been great. I mean, it's changed the lives of quite a few of my clients so far. And it's given hope to a lot of other folks that are business owners, because business sales don't qualify for 1031 exchanges. So over the last 4 to 5 years, it's been quite a steep learning curve, and it's been exciting, a little slower than I hoped, but consistency really is what helps you kind of win the game.
Well, very good. And excuse the extra noise that we have going on out here. We're cleaning the cement bricks, if you can believe that. We're cleaning them for a party a little bit later tonight. So if it's too noisy on my end, we're just going to have to ask Brett and Pierce and Jake to talk a little bit more than me. But appreciate you sharing that, Jake Carpenter from Washington State. And yes, it's sometimes difficult to encourage other professionals to learn new things. I say that, and I coach and I help a lot of CPA firm owners. And a lot of times, if you're dealing with a CPA who's not the firm owner, well, they're only allowed to do things that are approved by the firm or by the owner of the firm. Actually, was just dealing with a client here recently on a completely separate topic, but the staff accountant told her client that unless he's willing to pay her and her firm a retainer for 100 hours of work to research a new topic, that they wouldn't be able to do it because he's the only client in their firm that's asking about this particular strategy, which is strange and odd. Not just strange and odd, but this is typical. And I'm going to compare this to maybe a deferred sales trust and what Pierce was saying, that sometimes other professionals have a little bit of a hesitation coming on board right in the very beginning, unless they have time to get to learn about it, or unless they have time to become educated, which is what we encourage everybody to do. And in the moment that you think, so when is the right time? I guess this is the big question. When is the right time to start considering a deferred sales trust? I've had people ask me if they can't just set up one right now because maybe sometime in the next 2 years they're going to use it. Well, not necessarily the right time. That might be a little too soon. But if you're engaging with a letter of intent, if you are in the process and you think that in the near future, the next 60 to 90 days, you might be selling a highly appreciated asset, minimum of, hey, $1 million is an easy home run. That doesn't mean it has to be the minimum of the transaction, but it's a no-brainer at that point. $1 million net gain with at least $1 million transaction. How do we overcome these objections, and how do we help your professionals and help your team? And whether your closest advisor is your spouse, or if it's your accountant, your CPA, or if it's your Uncle Joe, or if it's your M&A advisor, what have you, we want to be able to help everybody get all the knowledge and education and expertise today when you're considering making this oftentimes largest transaction of your life decision, so that it doesn't feel rushed. I had a call yesterday. Some people who wanted to consider this today. They called me yesterday. That's a little too late. Essentially mentioned to them that, hey, the next time around, let's schedule a meeting in January. Let's talk about it more. Let's help you get educated. But honestly, from one day to the next, that is too late. And with that, I'd love for Brett, if you don't mind, just bearing with us for a minute, suffering through that 82-year-old voice that you have right now, saying hello to the group, letting us all know that you're here.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, Brett Swartz here. I'm fighting with the cold. It sounds worse than it is. I feel great. Energy's good. I'm smiling over here, but I sound like Dick Chicks, an 82-year-old man. So I appreciate everyone being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to start 2023 soon and do a lot of deals and help a lot of people. And by the way, if anyone wants to take action right now and connect with us, for Jake, you can go to strategictaxsolutions.com. That's strategictaxsolutions.com. And myself, it's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And by the way, Jake Carpenter also we just did a closed deal for a $10 million mobile home park deal. You can check out the online story of that on my YouTube channel, Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And Pierce is also a Newport Beach commercial broker and luxury broker down there. But I want to echo everything everyone's saying. And I think the biggest thing is consistency. If you can show up, if you can ask your questions, and it's the study and practice of anything you're trying to do. So the more you can study the deferred sales trust, the more you can practice it, and the more you can get around people who are actually doing these deals, the more the conviction and the certainty of conviction happens. And, once you get certainty of conviction, you have the ability to help yourself overcome the false belief of it's too good to be true, and or help your clients do the same. And that's what can lead to transformation. If this thing were so easy, everyone would be doing it. That's part of why you don't know about it. If this thing were so easy, there'd be a ton of copycats that would have gone through all of the audits and have the perfect track record like Campbell Law does. But it's not easy. but it is simple if you have enough time to digest it. So, and if you give your CPAs enough time to digest it, right? And also, if you also understand the role of the CPAs, not to approve or disapprove per se, because they might not have the expertise or the time, or you might not have the money to pay them. But that's why the Campbell Law Firm is also a CPA firm. They're not just speaking out of theory. They practice it as a CPA, the tax returns for the trust, obviously the audits and the reporting, 26 years, perfect, thousands and thousands and thousands of these trusts, as well as their law firm to defend it. And that's the beauty of this. It's a brilliant strategy. And once you get the nuances and once you're working with the team to help you execute it, the sky's the limit. And that's why we'll be diving deep in the new year on all things deferred sales trust as it pertains to freedoms. By the way, we'll also touch on 1031 exchanges and Delaware's statutory trust and opportunity zones and donor advised funds and cost segregation studies. It's not always a DST. Sometimes it's just something different depending on your circumstance. But if you don't have a tax flow plan, you're going to get hammered. And your clients are going to get hammered. So you're going to want to have a team and you're going to have to mastermind so that when you exit, you're not getting crushed. And so those are my thoughts for today. I'll pass it back over to the Jake Miller.
Appreciate that, Brett. I'm glad that your voice lasted that long. Absolutely some sage words for year end. And again, that's kind of what we want to tailor this around a little bit more. Oftentimes here at the end of the year, it's a time to reflect and recognize what you have done and reconsider, how we want 2023 to be. And with that in mind, a lot of our clients have been engaging with us for first quarter 2023 opportunities where a lot of them are selling their business. And I'd love for Pierce to jump in, and Jake Carpenter, feel free to add. But Pierce, if you kind of go through the process we take people through, whether they reach out to me, they reach out to you, they reach out to Brett, kind of give them the step or the phases we go through with a client in the business sell or in the process of their property sell or the sale of their capital asset.
Sure. And I want to just back up really quick because you touched on timing earlier, and I think this is super important. And, you said 60, 90 days out, and that's really good. I would almost say it would be better to start even earlier than that if you're even thinking about liquidating an asset. And the reason is because when you have the knowledge of what the deferred sales trust can do, it could definitely sway your decision. I mean, it's influential because the differences that you can actually, the difference in wealth that you can preserve using a deferred sales trust, especially on a business sale, I mean, in California, 37 to 40%. Like that's a difference, between $10 million and $6 million. That's a $4 million difference on a $10 million sale, right? So,
Pierce,
it's really important that you get to know that.
Yes, absolutely. And just to hammer the nail on the head a little bit more with that point, a client of ours in Texas, he was in a competitive situation in trying to buy a business. So he's on the buyer's side. This is a little bit different outlook. But because he had watched our presentations, he presented not the highest bid, not the highest offer, but the offer that had the highest net gain or net cash flow to the seller. And he won, not because he offered the highest bid, but because he brought a strategy to the table that nobody else brought to the table that allowed the sellers to sell their construction business without having to chop up the proceeds to the various taxing agencies. And so that to your point, it's not always the sellers that are coming to us. Sometimes it's the M&A brokers. Sometimes it's the buyers themselves wondering how they can't sweeten the pot and make their offer more attractive. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit. Please keep going.
Yeah. So, having said that, right, the first step is getting to know us and like us, trust us, right? And understanding what the deferred sales trust is, what it can do, what it can't do, who's it for, right? Do you qualify? That would be the first step, right? Before you even go down any sort of like sales process and all that kind of stuff, it would be to, ideally, right? The first step would be to learn about it. After you've kind of learned about it, and you know, even more ideally would be, as you're learning about it, bring your professional team along. You know, so your CPAs, your, you know, financial advisors, your tax attorneys, right? Whoever your trusted advisors are, bring them along for the journey, right? And see what it is that, you know, this is and how it fits into your guys' holistic plan. You know, and get them on board too. So that would be the first step, right? Knowledge is power, and learning about this, bringing your team in on this to learn about it, and hammer it with questions, right? Legitimize it. I mean, we're not afraid. Done it thousands and thousands of times. Perfect track record through the IRS, like Brett said. Like, I mean, there's so much that we have backing this thing. It's our mind says bring it on every single time, right? So that would be the first step. The actual like mechanics of it, right? Let's say that you decide, hey, you know what, the gain is significant enough, right? The tax liability is significant enough. The deferred sales trust makes sense, and everyone's kind of like on the same page and all. So I'll work from that sort of assumption, and maybe what I'll do, Jake, is just kind of walk through like how it works, and just kind of go through that step-by-step process.
Let's do that. I think there's actually a few viewers here on the panel right now that are here just to hear that piece. So from start to finish, A to Z, what does it look like, the engagement? How do we work with you? And what does that look like for them? Then, of course, we'll open up for questions afterwards.
Sure. So the first step would be we have, you know, we got to get your people on board, right? So we'll need some NDAs signed and all that kind of stuff. We'll make sure that everyone's good to go with that. We have some paperwork and stuff that you got to fill out in the beginning. And what we'll do is we'll take an x-ray of your deal, and we'll make sure it's a good fit. Once we've determined that it's a good fit, we've got, you know, that all situated, and we decide that it's a go. It's time for the actual, you know, liquidity event. So what will happen is you guys will go through the transaction kind of as normal. You will line up your ultimate buyer, assuming you're the seller, right? Before you, and you know, since we've worked with you before, right, we're going to add some language to your contract that basically allows you to do the deferred sales trust, and the buyer is going to cooperate with the deferred sales trust at no additional cost to the buyer. So we will add that language into your contract. As we go through the escrow process, what will happen is before the escrow closes, the trustee, Capital Against Tax Solutions, will actually purchase the asset. Let's use a really simple example, right? You have a $5 million asset. So the deferred sales trust or the trustee, Brett, will actually purchase the asset for $5 million. He will write you a note for $5 million on 100% seller carryback. We will, you know, kind of talk with you beforehand about your risk profile. We will understand your goals. We will understand your, you know, your investment strategies, what you want to do with the proceeds, all of that stuff, right? And that's preliminary. That's getting to know us. That fits your you know, we fit, right? We've talked through that with you. We know what you're going to invest in. We know your risk tolerance. You know, we know what investments you like. So we've already figured all that out, and that's all that preliminary stuff. So once we do, we'll write you a note depending upon what interest rate we kind of agreed on. And then the trust will turn around and they will sell the asset directly to the ultimate buyer immediately. The ultimate buyer will fund the trust, however they're going to fund it, with cash or financing or whatever the case is, right? But they will pay in full. The trust will then pay off any remaining debt that you have. And After that's done, the buyer takes title, walks away with the asset. The trust is left with all of the proceeds. You have a note, and then the trust will go ahead and start to invest funds in the strategies and stuff that we kind of already discussed. So that's kind of a high-level overview of that. I don't know, Jake, you want to fill in any holes?
Well, I think what I'll do is there are some questions that line up with what you just presented. I'm going to maybe touch on those. And these are from Mike. Mike, appreciate you. And of course, Mike, if while I'm answering these questions, you want me to clarify something, feel free to open up the mic and go ahead and interject. But first question, if you were to sell your assets to a trust and then through a trust to a third party within 60 or 90-day period, wouldn't that be considered a short-term capital gain? Well, it would if the sales price were different, meaning it's pretty much a wash sale. It literally usually happens the day of or the day before of the actual sale of the asset. So we initially exchange a promissory note that stays in your estate for the asset that was in your estate. So it could be your business, your multifamily, it could be your own home, whatever it was. We're going to take that asset and we're going to put it into the trust. But of course, we have to exchange it for something of similar or same value. And literally the same day, the next day, so there's not any chance of actual price or value fluctuations or movement. We then sell the property out of the trust and receive proceeds into the trust. And the important thing here is that the asset that you sold is sold by the trust. And that the proceeds you receive are received at arm's length from you. They're received by the trust and not by you. So you've not received what's called constructive receipt. And of course, there's a lot of other rules and internal workings and everything else and how this all works. But mechanically, we set up a pre-sale before the real sale. The pre-sale is your asset, promissory note to you. Assets in the trust then sells it. Trust receives the proceeds. You didn't receive the proceeds. You don't have to pay the taxes. So that helps out quite a bit. Second question from Mike. Well, first, Mike, is any clarification needed there? We'll go on to the second.
That makes sense.
Okay, very good. Now, Mike, I'm going to go into the next one. And of course, feel free to interrupt me if I'm answering in a direction other than what you asked. But here it says the income the trust earns through its investments, are they taxed in the trust or only when withdrawn by the beneficiary? So the trust operates as a business trust and oftentimes as a loss entity. What does that mean? So there's a interest rate for the promissory note, regardless of whether you're paying it out in the moment of or not. Essentially, there's a lot of these phantom expenses that we're able to incur on behalf of the trust that oftentimes offsets conservative to moderate earnings inside of the trust. Should you, such as some tech company clients of mine, should you have very exorbitant gains, there are other methods that we help offset that so that the trust itself does not have to pay taxes on the earnings inside of the trust. And we oftentimes work very closely with the tax attorney, and we implement these options from the very beginning so that you have everything set before you. A lot of it, as Pierce mentioned, will be evaluated based on your risk tolerance, what you plan, what your objectives are with the assets inside of the trust, what you hope to invest in. If your time horizon and risk tolerance are such that you hope to get 400% return, we're going to treat you very differently. And we're going to set up the trust a little bit. Well, the trust is going to be set up, but then we're going to augment the trust with a few other features so that we can help accommodate a tax favorable outcome for you in the use of the trust. Versus if you're the typical common individual that you have your business that has been the biggest, the best, the most lucrative thing of your life, and you sell your business or your multifamily home or what have you, and you just want to make sure that you don't lose any money or that you're very conservative and you have stable returns, then we don't have to be so fancy. Because, you know, with the promissory note alone, oftentimes we're offsetting a lot of the gains that you'll have inside of the trust. Does that more or less help you with that question?
Yes, but so a little bit more into detail on that, right? So I understand that, you know, if you sold an asset for $1 million, which was sold to you or the trust at, you know, at the same value, and then you go make those investments, and let's say you buy something else, right? And if there's capital gains on that, not ordinary income from collecting rents or whatnot, and now you sell that second piece of property for $2 million, right? So now you have $1 million capital gain coming into the trust. You're saying that's something that you guys can work with to create a tax strategy to
Yes.
defer some of those?
And I would say that's a very typical. I would say that we work with a lot, like Jake Carpenter mentioned, we work with a lot of real estate individuals who are doing exactly that. They're finding opportunities, and the power that this trust gives them over like a 1031. I mean, there's several properties that are not eligible for 1031, like your personal residence, right? But besides that, there's not the timing restrictions and limitations of the 45 days, the 180 days, all of these other limiting factors, right? So you're truly able to sell a property from the trust, receive the proceeds. In the interim, while you're waiting for the next opportunity, like even if it's ultra conservative, like treasury bills, what have you, we're doing better than money in just a bank account. And so let's say the next amazing deal is 187 days down the road. Fantastic. We're not limited. We can jump into that next opportunity deal. We can invest and we can sell again. Now, there's a certain way that we do this that usually optimizes, because, I mean, why would the trust need your depreciation? It doesn't need your depreciation. So a lot of times we do a joint venture with the trust. And I'm getting a little bit more into the weeds here, but just to let you know that there's a need and a purpose for this executive team that now works with you, because you might receive some benefits if you just purchase it all with the trust. You might receive double the benefits if you use the trust, a joint venture, depending on what your other income outside of the trust looks like. And so we like to optimize your not only your cash flow, but your tax flow, as Brett always says. Do you mind if I jump on the third question real fast?
Go ahead.
Yes. So who becomes the trustee of the trust, and how my vision implemented in the investment process? Well, we build everything around your vision. So I just want you to know that if this were a corporation, you would be the CEO, you and your significant other, spouse, what have you, or just you, whatever, you would be the CEO. And somebody such as myself would be like a CFO type person, just always bringing financial options to the table. And then the trustee is like the COO. He's the trigger man, or the guy that executes, the guy that does the stuff for purposes of the IRS. So when the IRS looks at something, they see Brett Swartz. They see capital gains tax solutions. But of course, Brett Swartz can't do anything without your signature and approval. So it's a two-step process for every decision, and that allows us to keep it at arm's length from you for tax purposes, but at the same time to accomplish your hopes and dreams in regards to your investment objectives. And of course, we all serve as like checks and balances for each other.
Makes sense. I have one more quick question, if you don't mind.
Feel free.
So the taxes in the trust are deferred for 30 years?
We set this up on a 10-year promissory note.
Okay.
Just like most loans, mortgages, what have you, you're able to refinance or reset it for another 10 at the end of the 10. Does that make sense?
Yes. And how long can that 10 years plus the extensions go on for? Is there a limit on that the IRS has?
We'll say the answer is no. However, being prudent, you should show the IRS that you do plan to pay back something somewhere along the path, right? And so I don't know if you've ever heard this from a CPA or a tax attorney before, but the IRS likes that you pay some tax at least. At least you're showing an intent, right? So even though you don't have to, as a best practice, and again, we can try to keep our clients as far away from any type of danger zones as possible. And so even though it's not required necessarily, we do highly motivate you to take some distributions out of the trust here and there.
Okay, makes sense.
And of course, taking the distribution out, you're going to be paying taxes, just how, whatever tax characterization it had coming in, it will be when it's coming out, except for what's coming out that's allocated to your promissory note interest.
Makes sense.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the questions, Mike. Those are spot on with today's discussion and exactly the direction we were going.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that.
Oh, but real quick, Mike, tell us where you're from. What part of the country you're calling in from?
I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I'm actually I have an LOI on my real estate assets, so I'm trying to figure out how to go about doing 1031 exchanges or looking at the deferred sales trust option.
Well, let's look at both of these. And the nice thing is you don't have to back out of one to do the other, meaning a lot of times we're the backup for a failed 1031. So if a 1031 can work for you and it's the best choice, so we'll help you evaluate that too, then we'll back you and support you. But then at the same time, it might be beneficial to have certain language in your contract that would allow you at the 11th hour to do this trust as well. And we work on a non-conditional basis, which means, or on a conditional basis, which means that we actually don't charge you a retainer. You're not paying us an hourly fee. The only thing that we have you do is sign an NDA so that, if you do implement this strategy, use our team to help you implement it. That way we can guarantee the quality and the compliance of the strategy. So feel free to reach out to Brett, to Pierce, to myself, and more than willing to help you through that transaction.
Thank you.
All right. And of course, love San Antonio. I have some dear friends there in San Antonio. They own a construction company, and San Antonio is doing a lot of great things these days. All
Hey,
right.
Jake.
Go ahead, Pierce.
So with that, Mike, you have specific, a deal that you're actually looking at right now to, liquidate and so on and so forth. What are some of the things that you've thought about as far as like pros and cons of the 1031 exchange that, you're kind of mulling around in your head? Like what is it that you're looking to do with that capital?
So my issue is not identifying deals, here and there. The asset that I'm selling, it's a high dollar amount. So, I can identify deals on 1031 in 45 days, or even prior when I'm in the agreement phase, right? For $1 million, $2, $3, $4 million. But the amount that I'm looking at, it actually puts me in a time constraint, right? Where I can't identify a high dollar asset within 45 days or even 60 days, and then close within the 6 months time, and make sure all goes smooth with all of those assets, So I kind of run into the issue where I need to look at a different strategy. I think 1031 works as a portion of it, but not for the whole amount. It's the dollar amount that's causing me to look at the other avenues.
Interesting. It's surprising how frequently I hear that answer. It's the time constraints. It's relatively consistent. I think it's one of the biggest pitfalls of a 1031. As cool as they are, time constraints can really put you in a bad position. So that's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Jake, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think you guys are right in line with what we need to consider and look at as far as the time constraints. Sometimes the 1031 can be spot on and the best thing that we can possibly do. Other times, we need to consider other options and have a backup plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going down this path a little bit more, Mike, what are some of the things that you like and dislike about what you heard today?
There's nothing that I have disliked so far. It's just that learning more, I think, is the key, right? There are a lot of little details that come into play, right? I don't quite disagree with the fact that this works, obviously, right? But again, the decision-making factor was an issue for me to understand that, hey, how these decisions are made. I think you guys work as a third party, becoming the trustee of the trust, right? Because I can't manage it myself. So learning more in detail about how that would work as like Jake mentioned, right? Right, the CEO and the CEO scenario would be beneficial to me, obviously, and then understanding more about how long this trust can last and how it can be passed on to my children. And again, of course, having some cash flow come to me at an ordinary income rate. Just some of the more detailed learning would be the ideal path for me. But nothing that I've heard so far is negative, I would say, discouraging.
Interesting. I want to kind of just touch on something, and maybe Jake, I can get your thoughts on this. I don't know if we've actually talked about this as I don't know, bluntly, as I'm going to kind of say it, but one of the objections that I get a lot is, control, right? Like, oh, there's a third-party trustee, right? You're giving up control. And I want to kind of just pose this thought out there to see, what your thoughts are, Jake. But I actually think that instead of giving up control, you're actually just trading controls. For example, you're going to give up a little bit of control, right, over the funds. With this constructive receipt, right, it's in the trust account. You have, to work with the CEO and the CFO, i.e. Brett and Jake, right, as you make investments and decisions and whatnot, and they're friendly and all that kind of stuff. And unless you're going to jump off of a bridge, and burn the world down with like an investment, they're not going to be like, no, you can't do that, right? Especially if it's in line with your risk policy. But what you gain is so much more incredible, because not with the 1031, what you give up is you give up control of your timing, right? With the deferred sales trust, you can control the timing. With the deferred sales trust, you can control the asset that you go into, right? With a 1031, you got to go back to real estate. So you're limited in the control in what assets. With the 1031, you can't really diversify, right? You can diversify within real estate, but you're in real estate. With the deferred sales trust, you can control the diversification of your portfolio. With the deferred sales trust, you can control payments that you receive. With a 1031, once you're in that real estate asset, right, that real estate asset is not really super controllable with the cash flow, right? So in my opinion, you actually gain a lot of control. Jake, what are your thoughts about that? And I'd like to hear your percent.
So I'll just go from the very beginning of the transaction when you move the asset out of your estate into the trust and you receive a promissory note. You've now gone from ownership to lendership. And to your point, Pierce, in some aspects, that's actually more control. Take into the point the most common debt that Americans own, which is a mortgage. If you stop paying on your mortgage, who really owns your home? Well, that's kind of a trick question, but what happens to your ownership of the home or your control over the home? Essentially, somebody else who is the creditor is able to exert more power and authority than you as a homeowner. So in this scenario, you've gone from ownership to lendership, and should there be anything outside of what makes you happy and satisfied, so to speak, or outside of the parameters in which we work through our scope of engagement, everything else, you ultimately, as the creditor against the trust, have control and authority over how we handle the assets inside of the trust. I hope that's a little bit helpful. In addition, I also bring up that you're leveling up here. There's a lot of DIY people out there, and this is not a DIY thing. This is not a do-it-yourself. But I think the word you were trying to use earlier, Pierce, was that you now are able to delegate. So it's not necessarily that you're giving or extending or whatever. You're now delegating some of your authority, but you maintain the ultimate say in all of our decisions. And of course, for purposes of the IRS, that everything's done at arm's length, all these other things. Brett Swartz, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, him as the trustee, he's there to be the person that's on the paperwork, to be the person that's ultimately responsible, that's acting as a fiduciary. And the rest of us are coordinating with him so that he can deploy the assets based on an investment plan that you approve of, that you're essentially the architect behind, and the rest of us, we're just the builders to help you accomplish it in the most tax-efficient way. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, Pierce or Mike, if I answered the question or if I touched on a few things that made sense.
Hey, let me jump in there, guys. I think that was amazing, Pierce. I think the illusion of the control with the 1031 is the opposite of freedom. And we've been taught and we've been told that you want to swap into your drop and drop into your swap, and that's freedom with 1031s and investments. Jake Carpenter and I just closed a deal, and his whole thing was he didn't have freedom. He had $10 million worth of 5 mobile home parks, and he felt like the 1031 was restricting his freedom. He felt like the ownership and the ongoing management and liability and ever-changing laws to collect his cash flow was restricting his freedom. And so the illusion of control with this idea of ownership is, I think, what the banks want us to know, want us to think, right? Because the banks, they lend money all the time, and they're the richest in the world, right? The banks. And in the DST, you become the bank, right? You are lending the funds. And in a sense, yes, you are transferring some control. It's a better way to put it, Pierce. And indeed, you don't have unilateral decision making in order to do things. You got to work with me, the trustee. That is part of the deal. That is why we have integrity. But by the way, integrity of the tax law. That's also why an IRA or a 401k or a 1031 exchange itself is 180 days. You are transferring control. You are following those rules laid out per the IRS guidelines for all of those different vehicles in order for you to defer your tax. And in this scenario, we're kind of like a long-term 1031 company where you are transferring that control, that unilateral control, not the ultimate control, because you have the protections of a lender. And the same reason a lender is not concerned that they're not going to get their payment and or they're not going to be able to have the control to close on the property or the asset, you have that same protection and all of those rights. And that is the illusion of control with the 1031, and that is actually the freedom of the deferred sales trust. It's a different set. It's definitely a different set of controls, and you got to get used to it. But once you do, it's exactly what you want. And also to add, Jake mentioned this before, when you do a joint venture partnership with the trust, guess what? You're running that LLC. You're opening that bank account. You're hiring the property manager. You're negotiating the deal. You're the property manager of that property. You're collecting the rents. You're doing the exact same things of having all of the controls that you would have in a 1031 as an owner, because you are the owner of the LLC. Now, you do have a joint venture partner that put up all the money. That is the deferred sales trust typically. And you do have a pref return owed back to him, which owes you the money. But that is the beauty and the elegance of this, that indeed you have these freedoms. You have the controls. And you just have to understand how to unlock these things and not put it in a box. You can't put the deferred sales trust in a box. A lot of people do because they're scared. They don't understand it because it's new. But once you understand it, and it opens up the possibilities of what actually can happen, I believe the control part goes completely away. Jake, you want to add anything to that?
In essence, we're trying to enable people to do more things. Trying to enable people to truly invest in the assets they want to invest in the time that makes most sense. It's hard to find that opportunity purchase within any specific time limitation. But if you have power over the timing of when you recognize these transactions as taxable, then no longer are you rushed into other deals and transactions that may not be the right deal for you, or at least the right timing. And
hey, Jake, I gotta cut you off. You ready? Here it is. This is my thought on this. You ever heard that saying, choose your hard? Choose your hard. And you can either choose to be hard, double down now for halftime later, or do the harder things now so it's easier later. So you can either have hard now and discipline and or later you have to pay for it if you don't do the things you should be doing, like investing or your health or all of those things, right? Well, I like to propose this with the deferred sales trust versus the 1031, choose your control, right? Choose your control, or choose your freedom or lack thereof, right?
Yeah, love it.
So very good words, and I think that we're at the top of the hour now, everyone. Brett, if people are wanting to reach out to you directly, how do they do that?
You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, look for the new book dropping soon, Building a Tax Deferred Action Strategy. We have people like the great Jake Meller in there. people like the great Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. I got a couple chapters too. So that's going to be dropping on Amazon soon. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please share this with someone who can inspire today. And that's where I would start. Jake, if they want to find you, where can they find you?
They can go to strategictaxsolutions.com, as well as 1-800-773-1848. And of course, you can find me in your book, Brett. Excited to be there and have my own little chapter, as well as all the great things we're helping people do, that we've helped people do in 2022 and that we're looking forward to in 2023. Jake Carpenter, should people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out and say hello and ask you about your experiences and see what you can help them with?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is to call my administrative assistant, Sarah House. It's Carpenter Capital at 509-591-9900. 509-591-9900.
Okay, Pierce York.
Sure. You guys can reach me at kingdomluxuryrealty.com.
Very good. kingdomluxuryrealty.com. Everyone, we want you to have a most amazing New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Hope that you've been able to complete all your goals and objectives for 2022, and that you're able to, live up to your wishes, your goals, your desires, your dreams for 2023. And we're here to support and help you with all things related to highly appreciated assets and capital gains. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.